Next, we have Adam Smith from Nebraska Forest Service with the Great Plains Initiative.
Thank you, Susan. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, this will provide a little bit of a visual for some of the work that we've been doing in the Great Plains. So really, we're going to start with the Great Plains Initiative that began in 2007, 2008, and bring us all the way to present day. We're going to do it pretty quickly, but really highlight the partnerships that happened and then the benefits and how those initial efforts are continuing. So really in the Great Plains, back in 2007, the 4 state foresters from North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas got together and really tried to identify what were the pressing issues across states that provided the greatest opportunity to work together. And at the time, it was emerald ash borer. So the partnership was driven by the threat of invasive species coming, which we knew was at some point was going to provide an opportunity or really a need for management. But we soon realized that we had pretty incomplete information about the extent and condition of our non-forest resources in Nebraska, across the state. Nebraska has been very active in leveraging the FIA program and some of those outlets or some of that information for our traditional forests, but in the land of grasslands and windbreaks and narrow riparian forest systems, we knew that there was another component of our landscape that we really didn't have enough information about, and really didn't understand the impact that these invasive species were going to have. So back in 2007, I believe as a redesigned pilot project from the U.S. Forest Service, the 4 state foresters got together and submitted a proposal for what became known as the Great Plains Initiative 1. And the goal honed in on identifying and really inventorying tree-covered lands in the rural and urban areas that do not qualify as forest land. Really that component of our landscapes that we lacked any information about and really lacked the insight to provide effective management. So that was the goal, is to identify that resource. The target outcome was simply to be able to increase our preparedness to address these issues at risk, but then also develop policy and develop management strategies to be able to provide this service back to landowners, whether it is through state forestry programs, but also providing this information as a resource to other land managers from NRCS and our natural resource districts in the state. So as a part of this program in 2007, when it was funded, the NIMAC group worked with us to develop one of the first non-forest inventory, statewide inventory efforts that had been done in the region. So they worked with us to develop the randomized sample of inventory plots across all 4 states, and then also provide training for our seasonal staff to be able to collect this level of information to where it was comparable to the detail and the type of information collected through FIA. We needed something that was robust, but also was able to be gathered in a relatively short amount of time. And this was, as it says here, really across all landscapes. And so rural areas, urban areas, within communities, and even inventorying some of these agroforestry systems that really had no shot of generating forest inventory data, just simply because they didn't meet the size qualifications. And so over the course of 2008 and 2009, the 4 states completed inventory information or inventory data collection. Nebraska was the lead on this effort. And so we gathered that information from across the 4 state agencies and then provided that back to the North Central Research Station, the FIA folks, to do the analysis and really help us provide the synthesis and provide some of that statistical muscle that state forestry agencies just were not able to provide. Some of the key findings from that program: nearly 50% of the total treed areas across the 4 states were classified as trees outside of forest. So we quickly identified that we were missing a significant segment of our resource in the state or in the region, and this really helped us determine how we wanted to manage and what the risk was Anyway, I think it was from 20 to 25% of all trees within the trees outside of forest area were ash. So all of a sudden, a significant component of our trees that we had no idea about are now at threat from emerald ash borer. We also learned that the trees that make up our trees outside of forest areas are typically smaller. So about 50% of the trees in these areas are less than 5 inches in diameter. And they're also shorter. And really the associated land use was agriculture, which is in and of itself is not necessarily shocking, but state forestry didn't have programs that were really targeted towards agricultural producers. Those were typically led by NRCS and NRDs, and this helped us better understand if our programs were actually hitting the targets that we had and reflective of the landowners and the land uses that we had in the 4-state region. So the initial program was simply, let's get the inventory information and let's try and quantify the size of this resource. There were some significant gaps in this initial effort. We didn't have location information. It was not a repeated inventory. And so it was really a snapshot in time that provided a significant amount of information, but not enough to be very actionable on the landscape. We can develop statewide initiatives, but not really localized efforts. So I guess real quickly, there were a couple documents that were produced as a part of this effort. One that was put together by Dave Nowak, summarizing the urban forestry plots that were collected across these 4 states. And then one that was put together by Dacia Meneguzzo out of the FIA office in St. Paul, really focusing on the rural landscapes and some of the implications of these treat systems that were not captured prior. Again, the expected outcomes, were simply to quantify the resource, but then it led to a lot of these spin-off projects that had a pretty significant impact in the region. Our randomized sample within communities across 4 states really was a precursor to the current urban forest inventory and analysis program. We had the opportunity to kind of pilot that, and there was a lot of lessons learned that came from our assessments that were completed in the late 2000s. The community threat assessment protocol, similar to the issues that we identified with rural landscapes not being able to know where we had these issues, we could provide a general statewide effort or summary of urban tree canopy, but we could not provide manageable and actionable information to communities. And so this was a street tree and community tree inventory process that identified trees, used at the time cutting edge information or data collection procedures to be able to provide that information back to urban forest managers and allow them to be actionable in their management. Really led to a regional emphasis on market development. As a result of, we now have information about the ash resource, but about this time we were really coming into our own understanding that we have significant woody plant encroachment and eastern red cedar issues in the state. And so the late 2000s was a significant effort or significant time for us to recognize that. And what has led to is continuation really of this 4-state partnership. In 2018, the GPI2 effort was funded, continuing to hone in on this trees outside of forest resource. In the upper right, an example of our FIA standard forest information that we have across the state of Nebraska, and the lower right is the identification of this trees outside of forest resource. And so that's now a 1 meter data set that we have across all 4 states that will allow us to be more effective in targeting our financial assistance to these regions where we know that we have a resource. As a part of this also included the on-the-ground inventory components of it to update our condition information, get an understanding of really what these windbreaks look like as far as form and function. Are they livestock windbreaks? Are they homestead windbreaks? To help us figure out who our stakeholders really were. So this effort is about to wrap up here the beginning of next year, and a little bit of insight as to sort of the next steps and where states are taking this individually. Nebraska was one of the, inaugural recipients of the 2020 Regional Conservation Partnership Program, the Alternative Funding Arrangement. So the Nebraska Forest Restoration Partnership is a effort by the Nebraska Forest Service, 16 of Nebraska's 23 natural resources districts, and our state Game and Parks Commission to address some significant forest resource issues that we have, specifically with lack of regeneration of both our oak forest and our cottonwood forests, and really a compositional shift away from those pioneer species towards shade tolerant and sort of less diverse forest types, and also our decline in agroforestry. We've got a significant component of the 1930s, the Windbreak Shelter Belt Project, the Great Plains Shelter Belt Project. A lot of those trees planted in the 30s to try and stop the Dust Bowl still exist in the Great Plains. The problem is now they're 90 years old and they're starting to show a lot of age. And so what we're seeing is various social pressures, economic pressures, having trees on the landscape are really putting landowners in a situation where they don't have confidence in their ability to manage their forests or their windbreak systems. And so what this partnership really is a collaborative Forest First initiative for a non-typical forestry state to address these key tree and forest issues. We have worked very closely with NRCS throughout the organizational history on individual landowner basis, but this is really the closest tie that we have ever had to our state NRCS office. We don't have a partnership agreement or an MOU with Nebraska NRCS at this time. We're hoping that this is really that first step into developing that long-term partnership with at sort of the administrative level. With some of the other organizations here, the NRDs, really it's about leveraging their expertise in their program. They implement the conservation tree programs for the state. So each NRD sells conservation trees for windbreaks or wildlife plantings. And they have those strong networks with producers that the Nebraska Forest Service doesn't have. And so it's leveraging that partnership with those NRDs, the networks and the resources that they have, and understanding that we have a lot of capacity to provide some training and technical assistance to those NRDs directly. Part of the partnership efforts that is not mentioned through the technical assistance or the financial assistance as a part of this award is really the capacity building across the state. The Nebraska Forest Service probably has 95% of the official foresters in the state of Nebraska, while NRDs and NRCS have a lot of staff across the state that implement land management activities. They're not often classically trained as foresters. And so this opportunity or this program is really a chance for these groups to work together to build each other's capacity, which is I think is something important in partnerships, as well as not just recognizing that I bring a lot to you, but recognizing the benefit that other partners have in improving our own programs. So I think that's a key takeaway from this is an opportunity for us to work together to provide direct assistance to landowners, but then also really that opportunity to rub elbows with our colleagues and get to know a little bit about how their programs work and how our programs can help in that. I wanted to touch on some of the questions as well that Susan had provided. Really, the learning process for the RCPP has been pretty steep. I think the benefit of the program is we can leverage the existing tree programs and some of those things of the natural resources districts, but we probably underestimated the technical assistance and the planning requirements from NRCS as a part of this program, because of maybe the nuanced differences between how our forest stewardship program and the NRCS field staff implement things like forest management plans. I was excited to hear that forest management planning is a topic of discussion for this group, because as we work towards getting more in touch with how NRCS and how the Nebraska Forest Service implement these programs, these little nuanced differences are going to pose some challenges. For us in Nebraska, we set up really well. Our forest resources set up really well for landscape management planning. And so we're excited by the stewardship modernization program that's happening through the Forest Service. The question is, as it was brought up earlier, is if we develop a landscape management plan for the northwest part of the state where we provide financial assistance through our WUI program, does that stewardship plan then translate to EQIP, or are we still required to assist NRCS by developing those forest management plans? So I think the easy way, or the benefit of having these programs or having these partnerships is you go into it knowing that you're going to do good things together, and then you come out with it maybe having identified more challenges than you assumed were there initially. But I think that long term, this partnership with NRCS in Nebraska is going to be excellent, not only for our organizations, but for landowners. Nebraska does not have a forestry fund pool, a specific pool of funding set aside anymore for forestry in the state. And so that was really the antithesis of this program, was we need to set aside some funding to make sure forestry stays at the forefront of the Great Plains. So we're excited by this partnership. We look forward to working closer with the NRCS office to finalize our negotiations for the RCPP. But so far, everyone has been excellent to work with, and I think we're gonna have some good outcomes once we make it through this initial phase.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for walking us through the GPI, the new RCPP project, and for sharing challenges with us. I think many on the call could really connect with all of that. And I think it's a great example of a program, suite of programs that has involved NRCS, conservation districts, and state forestry agencies, and Forest Service. Yeah. So thank you.